Great talent wins games, great stories win hearts. London, February 2005. In the cramped Highbury tunnel, studs scrape and tempers simmer. Patrick Vieira takes one measured step toward Roy Keane, and before a ball is kicked, the stadium already knows who owns the center of gravity. In that heartbeat, you glimpse everything: iron will, quiet authority, a code he enforced across England's most unforgiving midfield. How did a boy from Dakar, raised in the banlieues of France, become the captain who made Arsenal believe and the rival Manchester United feared? Patrick Vieira was never just another midfielder. He was the axis around which Arsenal's empire turned, the embodiment of power, elegance, and defiance in a single frame. Imagine a man who could glide past a challenge with a balletic poise, then crash into the next duel with thunderous force. A man who lifted 3 Premier League titles, 4 FA Cups, and captained the only team in modern English football to go an entire league season unbeaten, the Invincibles of 2003-2004. Yet here lies the paradox. While he defined Arsenal's golden age, he left the club just as decline began, a departure that still haunts supporters 2 decades later. What makes Vieira's journey remarkable is not just the trophies, but the firestorm that accompanied them. His running battles with Roy Keane, the infamous tunnel confrontation at Highbury, the countless red cards. Each episode painted him as both gladiator and general. Fans adored his authority, rivals loathed his dominance. How did a boy born in Dakar, raised in the roughest states of France, rise to command respect in one of football's fiercest battlegrounds? And what was the cost of carrying that burden year after year? This is the untold story of Patrick Vieira, the captain who gave Arsenal its spine and the warrior who left behind questions no trophy could ever answer. If the hook is the spark, the thesis is the flame. Vieira's career is the story of conflict, triumph, and the heavy price of leadership. At its heart, Patrick Vieira's story is about conflict and the price of leadership. He was the general who patrolled the most dangerous midfield in football, carrying both Arsenal's hopes and the fury of its battles. His career played out as a constant duel, with opponents like Roy Keane, with the media that branded him a villain, and even with the very expectations of being Arsenal's captain. The reward was immortality, lifting trophies, etching his name into Premier League folklore. But the cost was immense: a body pushed to its limits, a reputation scarred by controversy, and a legacy forever bound to the question, was it worth the fight? To understand the warrior, we must first meet the boy who dreamed of escape from Dakar's dusty streets and France's working-class estates. Patrick Vieira's beginnings were far removed from the roaring crowds of Highbury or the spotlight of Wembley. He was born in Dakar, Senegal, in June 1976. When he was just 8 years old, his family made a life-altering decision to leave West Africa for a new start in France. They settled in Dreux, a modest town about an hour from Paris, where the challenges of immigrant life were as relentless as any battle he would later face on the pitch. Money was scarce, opportunities were thin, and racism often lurked in daily encounters. For many children of immigrant families, the streets could swallow ambition whole. But for Vieira, football became both sanctuary and compass. On the rough pitches of Dreux, young Patrick's physical gifts were impossible to ignore. Taller and stronger than most of his peers, he carried himself with a quiet authority, even as a teenager. Yet raw strength alone was not his defining trait. Coaches noted his vision, an instinct to read the game several steps ahead, a quality rare in a boy his age. Friends remembered him as calm off the pitch, but once the ball rolled, he was transformed into a commander, demanding the game bend to his rhythm. What made Vieira different from so many other young hopefuls in the banlieue of France was his refusal to be intimidated by hardship. While others wavered between school, work, or drifting aimlessly, Vieira treated football as the one reliable escape.
His family, particularly his mother, instilled discipline, work hard, respect others, and never waste an opportunity. It was a foundation that would serve him well as bigger clubs began to take notice. By his mid-teens, Vieira was already drawing the attention of scouts, and soon a door opened. An invitation to join Caen, a professional club on the French Riviera. It was the first step on a journey that would take him from obscurity to immortality. But before he could command Arsenal's midfield, Vieira first had to prove he belonged among professionals in France's unforgiving football world.
Patrick Vieira's first professional steps came with AS Caen, a modest club on the French Riviera. At just 17 years old, he made his debut in Ligue 1, instantly standing out for his imposing frame and maturity beyond his years. Caen was no powerhouse, but it gave Vieira the stage to learn the game at a higher level. His calmness in possession and ability to command midfield caught the eye of coaches who entrusted him with responsibilities unusual for a teenager. In fact, before turning 20, Vieira was handed the captain's armband, a rare honor that spoke volumes about the leadership qualities others already saw in him. Yet his rise was not without challenges. Caen was struggling financially, and the club's lack of stability meant that many young talents were being scouted by Europe's giants. In 1995, Vieira made a bold leap. He signed for AC Milan, one of the most glamorous clubs in the world at the time. But in the star-studded environment of Milan, where legends like Franco Baresi, Paolo Maldini, and Roberto Baggio reigned, opportunities were scarce. Vieira managed only a handful of appearances, learning more from the training ground than the pitch. It could have been the moment his career stalled, another promising youth lost in the shadows of a super club. Instead, fate intervened. In 1996, Arsene Wenger, newly appointed at Arsenal and keen to reshape the club with continental talent, recommended Vieira to the Gunners' management. Arsenal secured his signature for a modest £3.5 million, a bargain that would change the club's destiny. At first, English football doubted him. Could a lanky French midfielder with limited playing time in Italy survive the brutal pace and physicality of the Premier League? Vieira answered that question almost immediately. On his Arsenal debut in September 1996 against Sheffield Wednesday, he came on as a substitute and transformed the game. His passing range, composure, and authority stunned fans and pundits alike. Former teammates later recalled how, even in training, Vieira carried himself as if he already belonged. Tony Adams, the club's captain at the time, recognized something special. You could tell straight away, he had presence. Not many players walk in and own the midfield from day one. That debut was more than a promising start. It was the signal of a revolution. Arsenal had found the heartbeat of their new era. Yet every revolution needs its defining battle. And for Vieira, the true breakthrough would come when Arsenal's ambitions collided with Manchester United's dominance.
By the late 1990s, the Premier League was firmly in the grip of Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson's side had power, aura, and a stranglehold on English football. For Arsenal to rise, they needed a warrior who could not only stand toe-to-toe with United's midfield, but also unsettle it. Patrick Vieira became that figure, the pivot of Arsene Wenger's new-look Arsenal. The 1997-1998 season was Vieira's true breakthrough. Wenger's French Revolution was in motion, with arrivals like Emmanuel Petit, Nicolas Anelka, and later Thierry Henry reshaping Arsenal's identity. In the heart of midfield, Vieira and Petit formed a formidable duo, two Frenchmen dictating the tempo in a league still accustomed to all-action long ball battles. Vieira's ability to combine crunching tackles with incisive passing immediately set him apart. He was not merely destructive, he was constructive, the bridge between defense and attack. The defining moment of that campaign came in the run-in of spring 1998. Arsenal, once 12 points behind United, surged with relentless momentum. Vieira's domination in midfield, particularly in high-pressure matches, allowed Wenger's side to play with confidence. On May 3, 1998, Arsenal clinched the league title at Highbury, and just weeks later, they added the FA Cup to complete the double. Vieira, still only 21, had become the embodiment of Arsenal's new era. Powerful, elegant, fearless. But with success came notoriety. Vieira's combative style often crossed the line. He was sent off twice in the space of 4 days in September 1999, cementing his reputation as one of the league's most volatile players. Yet, even his disciplinary issues fed into the mythology. Supporters loved his ferocity, rivals feared it. Every yellow card felt like proof of his unwillingness to yield an inch. This duality, hero to some, villain to others, only magnified his presence. Perhaps no single battle defined Vieira's breakthrough more than his clashes with Roy Keane. United's captain was a relentless competitor, and when the two collided, it was more than a football match. It was a clash of ideologies. Vieira versus Keane came to symbolize the Premier League's fiercest rivalry, Arsenal's artistry and steel against United's relentless will to win. Their duels, whether in midfield skirmishes or the infamous Highbury Tunnel showdown, elevated the drama of English football to gladiatorial heights. By the dawn of the new millennium, Vieira was no longer just a promising talent. He was the standard-bearer of Arsenal's ambitions. In 2002, he added another double to his collection, again bossing the midfield as Arsenal outmaneuvered United and Liverpool. He was named club captain in 2002 after Tony Adams' retirement, a moment that formalized what everyone already knew. Vieira was Arsenal's leader, on and off the pitch. The boy who had once struggled for minutes in Milan had now become the face of Arsenal's resistance, the commander who gave them belief they could dethrone United. His breakthrough wasn't merely about winning trophies. It was about changing the psychology of a football club. But if this was Vieira's rise, the years that followed would become his legend, culminating in an unbeaten season that redefined what was possible in the Premier League.
Patrick Vieira's peak coincided perfectly with Arsenal's golden era, and nowhere was that more evident than in the 2003-04 season, the year of the Invincibles. By then, Vieira had already cemented his status as one of the Premier League's most commanding midfielders, but that campaign elevated him into the realm of legends. As captain, he was not merely a participant in history, he was the axis around which it was written. The Invincibles story is often told through Thierry Henry's goals, Robert Piré's flair, or Jens Lehmann's saves. But at the very heart of it all was Vieira. His presence gave Arsenal the courage to impose themselves week after week. He embodied the team's duality. Artistry fused with aggression, beauty laced with bite. Whether it was a crunching tackle to win back possession or a driving run through midfield to set an attack in motion, Vieira symbolized the spine Wenger's philosophy required. One match in particular encapsulated his influence, the 2-1 victory over Chelsea at Highbury in February 2004. Facing a rising rival backed by Roman Abramovich's millions, Arsenal needed to assert their dominance. Vieira opened the scoring with a surging run and delicate finish that stunned the Blues. It was more than just a goal, it was a statement that Arsenal's power, embodied in their captain, remained unmatched. As the season progressed, Arsenal's unbeaten run gathered momentum. The defining clash inevitably came against Manchester United. At Old Trafford in September 2003, Vieira was both hero and villain, scoring the opener before being controversially sent off. The match ended in a notorious brawl, with Ruud van Nistelrooy missing a last-minute penalty that kept Arsenal's run alive. The moment etched itself into Premier League folklore, symbolizing both the volatility and the resilience of Vieira's leadership. That unbeaten season wasn't just about avoiding defeat, it was about psychological dominance. Every opponent knew that facing Arsenal meant facing Vieira, and few came away unscathed. His reading of the game, ability to intercept passes, and knack for winning second balls suffocated opposition midfields. Off the ball, he demanded discipline. On it, he dictated tempo. In an era when English football still celebrated brute force, Vieira married it with intelligence and grace. Statistically, his impact was immense. He featured in 29 of Arsenal's 38 league matches in that unbeaten season, scoring 3 goals and assisting crucial plays.
But numbers alone don't capture the aura he carried. His teammates consistently described how his presence lifted those around him. Thierry Henry once remarked that when Vieira played, Arsenal felt untouchable. Vieira's peak also extended beyond Arsenal. With France, he was a central figure in their golden generation, winning the 1998 World Cup and Euro 2000. By the mid-2000s, he was considered not just one of the best midfielders in England, but in the world. Comparisons to legends like Lothar Matthäus and Frank Rijkaard were common, though many argued that Vieira's blend of athleticism and technical control was unique to his era. Yet, being at the top came with its burdens. Constantly targeted by referees and opponents, Vieira's disciplinary record grew notorious. He accumulated 9 red cards in his Arsenal career, a Premier League record at the time. Critics painted him as reckless, but to Arsenal fans, each dismissal was proof of a captain who refused to back down. His duel with Roy Keane in the Highbury tunnel in 2005, when the two nearly came to blows before kickoff, remains one of the most iconic images in Premier League history. It wasn't just theater, it was the physical manifestation of Arsenal versus United, Wenger versus Ferguson, dominance versus defiance. Despite the firestorms, Vieira's leadership was unquestioned. After Tony Adams retired in 2002, many wondered who could fill his shoes. Vieira didn't just step into the role, he redefined it. He led by example, blending inspiration with intimidation. For the younger players, Ashley Cole, Cesc Fabregas, and Kolo Touré, he was a mentor, instilling professionalism and resilience. For established stars, he was the steadying presence in the storm. The peak of Vieira's Arsenal journey arguably came in May 2005 and the FA Cup final against Manchester United. After a bruising goalless draw, the match went to penalties. With the score balanced, Vieira stepped up to take what would be the decisive kick. Cool and clinical, he slotted the ball past Roy Keane to win the cup for Arsenal. It was his final act in an Arsenal shirt, a captain delivering silverware, sealing victory against his fiercest rivals. That moment symbolized everything about Vieira's peak: the pressure, the rivalry, the leadership, and the triumph. It was the last page of a glorious chapter, but also the beginning of the end. Just weeks later, whispers of his departure grew louder. Arsenal's era of dominance was fading, and so too was his time in North London. If the Invincibles defined Vieira's peak, his departure marked the start of Arsenal's decline, and a new bittersweet chapter in his own career.
For Patrick Vieira, the summer of 2005 was both triumph and farewell. Just weeks after burying the final penalty against Manchester United to lift the FA Cup, the Arsenal captain stunned fans by departing for Juventus. It was the end of nearly a decade in North London, a decade in which he had defined Arsenal's identity. But behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to show. Arsene Wenger, ever pragmatic, sensed his captain's physical powers were starting to wane. Younger talents like Cesc Fabregas were emerging, and the club, facing financial pressures from the new Emirates Stadium project, decided to cash in. Vieira's move to Juventus was bittersweet. In Italy, he was still respected as one of Europe's premier midfielders, but the transition was anything but smooth. He joined a star-studded side that included Alessandro Del Piero and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and initially seemed poised to add more silverware to his collection. However, his one season in turn coincided with the eruption of Calciopoli, the match-fixing scandal that rocked Italian football. Juventus were stripped of their 2005 and 2006 Serie A titles and relegated to Serie B. Vieira, like many others, was left tainted by association, forced to move on once more. From there, he landed at Inter Milan, where he played under Roberto Mancini and later Jose Mourinho. At Inter, Vieira collected Serie A titles, but his role was no longer central. Injuries began to erode his once iron frame. The powerful surges through midfield became rarer, the crunching tackles less frequent. Still, his presence in the dressing room carried weight. Younger teammates looked to him for leadership, even if his minutes on the pitch dwindled. Meanwhile, on the international stage, Vieira continued to shine. He was a key figure for France in the 2006 World Cup, anchoring midfield alongside Claude Makélélé as Les Bleus reached the final. His performances reminded the world that, even past his absolute peak, Vieira remained a formidable competitor. Yet the heartbreak of losing to Italy on penalties marked a symbolic end for France's golden generation.
By 2010, Vieira's European chapter closed with a return to England, this time with Manchester City. The move surprised many. City, then an ambitious project flush with new money, sought veterans to guide their transition. Vieira wasn't signed as the powerhouse he once was, but as a mentor, a bridge between eras. He played sparingly, yet his influence in shaping a winning mentality was noted by both staff and teammates. In 2011, he lifted the FA Cup with City, ironically against Stoke, a club symbolic of the gritty English football he once dominated. It was a poetic bookend. His first major trophy with Arsenal had been the FA Cup, and now his final act as a player ended the same way. What defined this phase of Vieira's journey was not dominance, but adaptation. He shifted from gladiator to elder statesman, from headline maker to quiet mentor. His setbacks, injuries, suspensions, failed transfers could have overshadowed his career, but instead they enriched it, painting him as a figure who had lived football's extremes: glory, scandal, decline, and redemption. When Vieira finally hung up his boots, the question became, how would history remember him? Not just as a footballer, but as a leader who shaped an era.
Patrick Vieira's legacy is etched not only in Arsenal's history, but in the very DNA of the Premier League. He redefined what it meant to be a midfielder in England, combining strength and steel with vision and elegance. To Arsenal fans, he was the captain of captains, the man who led the club through its greatest modern triumph, the Invincibles season. His armband did not just symbolize authority, it symbolized defiance, a refusal to bow to United's dominance, or anyone else's. Beyond the medals, 3 Premier League titles, 4 FA Cups, a World Cup, and a European Championship, Vieira's influence can be measured in the players who followed. From Yaya Touré to Patrick's protege Cesc Fabregas, and even to modern enforcers like Rodri, echoes of his style still resonate. He became the archetype of the box-to-box midfielder, a player who could dictate tempo, dominate duels, and inspire belief. Even in management, from New York City FC to Crystal Palace, Vieira carried that same aura. He has not yet scaled the managerial heights, but the respect he commands remains undeniable. To this day, mention his name to Arsenal supporters and eyes will light up, not only with memories of trophies, but of a leader who embodied pride, resistance, and courage. Patrick Vieira's story reminds us, greatness isn't just in the titles you win, but in the spirit you leave behind. And as with every legend, the final word is not just about the past, it is about how we carry his story forward.
Great talent wins games. Great stories win hearts. Patrick Vieira's journey from Dakar to Highbury, from prodigy to invincible, remains one of the most powerful chapters in Premier League history. His story is a reminder that leadership is forged in fire, in rivalry, and in resilience. Thank you for watching this episode of EPL Legacy Stories. If Vieira's battles and triumphs moved you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your favorite Vieira memory in the comments below. And stay tuned, because next time we'll dive into the other half of football's fiercest rivalry, the untold story of Roy Keane, the man who stood toe-to-toe with Vieira in the greatest battles the Premier League has ever seen.